Good evening, everybody. Today is Wednesday, April 14th, 2021. The time is 6:30. And I would like to call this meeting of the Macomb Township Board of Trustees to order. Before we do the pledge, a couple of brief announcements. For anybody who is participating remotely, please know that we are having a router problem in our building. So if your feed cuts off, it should reconnect briefly. Just give it a second. I apologize for any inconvenience. Additionally, for any of the members of the public who have come today, we are live again. However, we are still subject to the Health and Human Services rules regarding gatherings, meaning we have to remain 6 feet apart, wear masks. We have a contact tracing sheet at the front counter, and we would appreciate everyone's cooperation. So with that being said, we will now say the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Clerk Posey, will you please call the roll?
Yes, Mr. Chairman. Trustee Kuzmano.
Here.
Trustee Lucido.
Here.
Trustee Oliver.
Here.
Trustee Nevers.
Present.
Treasurer Drollet.
Here.
Clerk Posey here. Supervisor Viviano.
Here.
All members are present.
Thank you. Moving on to approval of the agenda. So move.
Support.
Clerk Posey, are there any additions or corrections?
Yes, Mr. Chairman. We have an amendment to item number 14 to read authorization to extend the COVID-19 expanded FMLA and emergency paid sick leave policy pursuant to Extended American Rescue Plan Act effective April 1st, 2021. And an amendment to item number 17 to read agricultural AG instead of agricultural R-1. That's all the changes I have.
Thank you. We have a motion by Treasurer Gillette and supported by Clerk Posey to approve the agenda as corrected.
Yes.
Clerk, all in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? That motion passes. Moving on to approval of the bills.
So move.
Second.
Is there any discussion on the motion for the bills? Hearing none. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All opposed? That motion passes. Moving on to item number 4 is the approval of the previous meeting minutes for March 24th, 2021.
Move
there a
to
motion?
approve.
Is that Trustee Lucido? Yeah. Is there any discussion? Hearing none. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? The motion passes. Moving on to the consent agenda.
Move the entire consent agenda in its entirety.
Support. Is there any discussion on these consent agenda items?
Mr. Chairman, I just have one comment. I noticed this on the consent agenda item 6A and consent agenda item 6B that I think that we should request legal counsel to the supervisor's office to clean up the language a little bit so that it's clear that the release of damages is for all compensation and possible claims, and that's all inclusive.
You're referring to the easement agreement itself, I assume, correct?
Yes, I'm referring to the release of damages.
Yeah.
I wasn't really happy with the language because it wasn't real clear to me whether or not the attorney's fees was included, or if there was going to be a possibility of someone coming to the township and asking for attorney's fees down the road. I'm going to be sending some criticisms to legal counsel so that it can be standardized and make it clear that rather than unclear, because in these 2 items, that's all I have.
Okay. Are you going to communicate that directly with Mr. Loya then?
Yes, I will.
Okay. Any further discussion on the consent agenda? Okay, all in favor of the consent items?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion passes. All right, moving on to public comments. Since we are both in person and virtual, I just want to comment that anybody who wishes to make a comment in person, we've changed the format slightly. We're actually going to have you come up to the table right in front of us so that your voices can be picked up on speaker. And Mr. Ivanowski, when the live public is done commenting, I'll ask you to open the floor for anyone who wants to participate virtually. Right here at this table. Yep.
These little pucks right here.
All right. Boy, this is close.
Well, close and personal. I know.
First of all, Paul Garrett, my name's on a file in the clerk's office. Want to welcome the new board members. Hopefully it's a better job than the last ones did. On a positive note, Mr. Viviano, I want to thank you for having enough backbone to get rid of the poison pill that we had on this board for so long as a legal defense. That's a positive note. I've been paying attention on the meetings, but I don't do the Zoom things because my internet system does. So this is where I'm at. This is my first time meeting. I am a little bit disappointed, Charlie, especially with you. The pay raises for the 3 elected officials. Mr. Oliver, I think that should have waited. You put the motion in front. I think that should have waited till the new board came up. Not placed it after you already won the primary and run re-election. I think your timing was extremely poor. When half of the county was losing their jobs with the COVID. You hand out pay raises. Leon, you've built your whole political campaign on watching the taxpayers piggy bank. You know what? I watched it, go right in your pocket. Christie, you're the only one I wanted to give the raise to the last time this came up in front of the board, because the other 2 didn't deserve it. Each and every one of you has put your name on the ballot, knowing exactly what the pay was. And before you even took office, you took a pay raise. And you didn't vote for it, you didn't table it, you didn't have any discussion on it. Very disappointed in the taxpayers. Mr. Oliver, you own a business. Mr. Viviano, your family owns a business, you were in business, you were in a management position. Mr. Lucido, you're in a management position, you own a company. Frank, I don't know whether you have any employees or not, but I don't know, but any one of you gave any employee a $3,000 pay raise just for the hell of it, with a guaranteed $3,000 for the next several years, without even doing a thing. I don't, correct me if I'm wrong, unless it was family related to you. Mr. Oliver, did you give any of your employees a $3,000 pay raise?
You know, I don't
No,
even want to go into
no,
my
you
business
didn't.
with you.
Because it comes out of your pocket. Anything about it till afterwards. I wish the board the best of luck. I hope we could correct the previous mistakes. We have a lot of bad contracts that the city signs, or the township signed before. I hope they get looked at. Frank, you know how I feel. Me and you've talked plenty on different issues. I hope they do get looked at. I wish nothing but the best for this board. And I hope you just watch the taxpayers' dollars.
Thank you. Any other comments from the audience that's here? Mr. Ivanowski, is there any participants virtually?
Yes, sir. There's 11 participants, but at this moment, I do not see anybody wishing to talk.
Should we remind them how to participate remotely?
Yes, if you would like to ask a question or have a comment, please press *6 on your phone. or if you're on a computer, click the raise hand button, please. We have Mr. Jeff Yarrow that would like to say something. Mr. Yarrow?
There it is.
Well, I confirm I'm unmuted.
You're good.
Yeah,
Good.
you are muted, sir.
Thank you. As I said, I'm Jeff Yarrick. I'm state representative that covers most of Macomb Township. I think I've met a number of you. Haven't had a chance to meet every one of the new board members. Again, just wanted to reach out. I'm in Lansing today working, taking care of things such as the budget. We're deep in the budget process. I don't have any great announcements for you. I just continue to want to reach out and make sure the board and the residents of Macomb Township know that myself and my office is available, that we still have a lot of unemployment issues that people call with concerns. And just, again, want to reinforce the fact that we're available here for the residents of Macomb Township. So thank you.
Thank you, Jeff. Appreciate your work you're doing. Mr. Ivanowski, any other comments from the people participating on Zoom?
Would you please repeat that? I didn't hear you, sir.
Is there any other persons wishing to comment?
No, sir, not at this moment.
Okay, so we will close public comments and we'll move on to new business. Moving on to item 9, we have a request to approve the recommendation to award the bid for the 25 Mile Road and Romeo Plank water main relocation to C&P Construction, Inc. for $283,800. Is there a motion?
Move to approve.
Mr. Wangland, are you on?
Yes, I am.
Give us some background, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and board members. Tonight, Water and Sewer is in front of you asking for permission to award this contract. This will be for 25 and Romeo Plank replacement water main project. This will be for the west leg, I'll call it the west leg of the roundabout at the corner of 25 and the Plank. As we've been doing in the past, we were making every effort to get our utilities out from under the influence of pavement. That's the nature of this. I might also add that this project is part of the capital improvement program. With that said, we gave notices to the 11 pre-qualified bidders who are currently pre-qualified with us. 7 of those 11 pre-qual vendors did pick up plans and reviewed them. And I might add that 5 did submit bids. And I think the 5 bids are in front of you in your packet. And the low bid is with C&P Construction in the amount of $283,800. Engineering, Water and Sewer have met with C&P Construction. I think we're comfortable with them. They understand the scope of the project, and we are recommending that we move forward with awarding the project to C&P tonight. Be happy to answer any questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Wayman. Are there any questions or discussion from the board?
I have one question. Has this contractor done work for the township prior to this?
Yes, they have.
Everything went well with them?
Yes.
Anything else? Okay, hearing no more discussion. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion passes.
Thank you, board.
Thank you, Mr. Wyman. Moving on to item 10, we have a request for authorization for the township supervisor to sign a warranty deed for the dedication of the alternate road right-of-way for Hummel Acres Site Condominium in the Macomb County Department of Roads. Is there a motion?
So move.
Second.
Mr. Van Tifflin, can you give us some background, please?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, board members. As part of a consent judgment for the Hummel Acres site, the developer was required to dedicate the right-of-way for 22 Mile, as well as the future right-of-way of Garfield North, about a half a mile north of 22 Mile Road. The developer has dedicated the right-of-way to the township, which was part of the language in the consent judgment. we're now in a position where we need to deed the property over to the Macomb County Department of Roads to facilitate the extension of Garfield Road, which they are currently working on. So what's before you tonight in your board packet is a copy of the deed that the supervisor would need to sign, assuming that the board approves it tonight. With that, I'd be happy to answer questions. We are recommending approval.
Thank you, Mr. Van Tiffel. Any questions for Mr. Van Tiffel or discussion from the board? Okay, hearing none, we have a motion for the supervisor to sign the warranty deed for the right-of-way for Hummel Acres. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries. Moving on to item 11, request for the authorization for the township supervisor to sign a quitclaim deed for the dedication of the ultimate road right-of-way for 25 Mile Road along the frontage of parcel number 08-05-400-004 to the Macomb County Department of Roads. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Support.
Mr. Van Tiffel.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, board members, this particular property on 25 Mile Road was sold to the township a number of years ago as part of a tax foreclosure. The township has since sold the property. However, before the township sold the property, it accepted the 60-foot of right-of-way along 25 Mile Road for public purposes. We are now in a position where we want to dedicate that 60 feet of right-of-way to the Department of Roads. What's before you is the deed that would accomplish that. We're asking for authorization for the supervisor to sign the deed so we can accomplish that. Be happy to answer any questions. We're recommending approval.
Thank you. Any questions? Any discussion? Okay, hearing none, we have a motion to authorize the supervisor to sign a quitclaim deed for the right-of-way along 25 Mile Road for parcel number 08-05-400-004. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries. Item 12 is a request for permission to execute a revised cost-sharing agreement for the construction costs with Macomb County Department of Roads for 23 Mile Road reconstruction and the widening project between Card Road and North Avenue in the amount of $1,171,547. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Support.
Mr. Van Tiffel.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, board members. Last June, the township board approved a cost sharing agreement for the widening of 23 Mile Road between Card Road and North Avenue. That was in the amount of $780,000. That was based on a construction estimate that the Department of Roads had put together at the time that the cost would be $6 million. When they actually went up to bid for the project came in higher than what they had estimated. The new construction estimate is $6,936,200. That means that the parties that pay for the road, which are the county, the township, as well as the federal government, have to pick up that additional cost. So they have provided the revised cost sharing agreement that's in the board packet that explains what the additional costs are. They were able to secure some additional federal funding. However, each of the parties still have to pick up the balance. So the new cost for the construction portion of the project is $1,171,547. That's for the township piece. That's an increase in the overall cost to the township of $391,547. We are recommending approval. Obviously, this project has started construction. It started last year. And I expect that they're going to be starting up again soon this year. So we've reviewed the document. We're recommending approval. Be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Van Tiffel. Any questions or comments from the board?
Mr. Chairman, I have a question. Is the expenditure within budgeted, approved budgeted parameters?
Jim, do you want to field that one?
I honestly don't know what I assume that the budget was adjusted to what the previous cost sharing agreement indicated. So I know that there is that there are funds that are set aside in the road paving fund. I'm just not sure how much is in that fund right now.
My understanding is that when this came up, Mr. Guzmano, this was a surprise to us, as it was to the Department of Roads. The original cost sharing agreement was based on an estimate that turned out to be very incorrect. And now, while I don't like it, we don't have any choice but to pay for the difference.
Mr. Chairman, is it my understanding that any deficiency would come from the general operating fund?
That's correct.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Chairman, I have a question as well. It's for Mr. Van Tiffelen. Jim, this is a second road project that has ended up costing more than the original projection. Looking at M59 as well. Are you seeing a increase in these sort of estimates that turn out to be not adequate when the bids come in? Or is this, how common is this occurrence?
So the one that we had previously approved for MDOT for the M59 work, there were items that were just left out completely of the packet that the board had approved last year. So that I can hang my hat on. It just wasn't a complete estimate. This one, I think, is more of a situation of the market that we're in with regard to construction. There's a lot of construction going on, and I think that's driving prices up. Material costs go up, fuel costs are going up, labor costs are going up, and I think that's just where we're at in the general economy with regard to construction. Lumber's up. All the materials seem to be going up as well as labor.
So originally we had planned on what, 780,000 approximately, you state?
Yes.
This is like a 50% increase.
Yeah.
For our part.
Yeah, for our portion of it. Are you concerned that other projects that we're doing with the Department of Roads may come in with similar substantial increases?
My experience is, from an engineering standpoint, there are occasions where prices go up faster than you can adjust for when you're doing an estimate. The estimate that was done in the previous agreement was probably done a year and a half ago. And so if prices go up in the interim, that's not going to be reflected in that estimate. So, but engineers do adjust when they get bids in. So I'm assuming that what will happen with the next stretch, between Heidenreich and Card, they'll adjust how they estimate these things before they actually give us the agreement. Unfortunately, the agreement is given to us before they actually go out to bid. And that's what happened here. This is based on an engineer's estimate versus the bid.
When we approved that first estimate of 780,000, approved the expenditure of 780,000, did we automatically agree to cover any actual costs? Or in other words, what were we technically agreeing to? What if we said no and voted this down today, for example?
The agreement indicates that they will bill the actual cost to the township, and the township is on the hook for those actual costs. So yeah, I would say in the agreement, we are, like the supervisor said, we're responsible for these costs. Honestly, I don't know what would happen if we would have turned this down, tonight. I don't know if that causes them to stop the project, or if there's some other mechanism that they would, get funding for. I don't think they can get any more from the federal government than what they've got. I think they tried to get as much as they could.
Jim, what was the change in total of the contract as a percentage? Wasn't it roughly 20%? I realize ours is about a 50% increase because we're picking up the difference from where the federal government gave us, but I think the increase was around 20%.
Yeah, it was, yeah, somewhere in that neighborhood, yes.
Thank you.
I have one question.
Sure.
Is there any way when we approve these, like we weren't on board at the time, but back in July, saying here, we'll approve where you're at, but if you're not within 10% of where you're telling us, we're not going to do it? I mean, do we have a right to do anything, or say,
Well,
if you're not within 10%, you're going to cover 50% of the increased cost?
we don't have to agree to any cost sharing agreement, but if we don't, or if we tried to insert a clause that the county road department doesn't like, they just won't do the project.
So our hands are tied on this.
If we want a 23-mile road expanded, we're likely gonna have to at least come to an agreement. We could certainly try and negotiate better terms in the future, but you know, we're only one part of that negotiation.
I'd just like to see something a little bit more, I mean, obviously, we're 40% higher than what we had projected. And we don't have anything to say about it.
And the road department is actually picking up the same difference that we are too.
Sure.
So it's- We're both of us are screwed,
Don't have a whole lot of control.
not as much as we would like.
Just to follow up on that, Mr. Supervisor, just to add on what Mr. Van Tiffelen discussed, what we're experiencing in business today, there's two things happening. One, supplies of things are really short. So we all know it's a supply and demand world. And the other thing, just for example, fuel is going up in 1 year, $1 a gallon. So could you imagine how many gallons of fuel is burnt on a job like this? So just keep adding all that stuff up and so it's these jobs to me, which I'm not happy about this, but I understand more because they're moving targets. You just can't say this is gonna cost this much and that's all there is to it. And because someone's gonna eat it somewhere, someone's gonna eat the extra money. And the state don't want to, we don't want to, the county don't want to. So I guess we're in what I call jackpots. And, you know, we just gotta make the best of it and make sure we're only paying our fair share. We're not paying somebody else's fair share. So that's all I want to make on that. But I'm happy the road's at least going through. So it's gonna hurt, but it'll be a nice road when it's done, so.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to ask legal counsel whether or not what his or their perspective is on our options and whether or not it's possible to negotiate an agreement with an agreement to arbitrate or some other clause. If they have an experience, I'd like to hear from legal counsel before casting my vote.
Mr. Tomlinson?
Yeah, I'm sorry, Mr. Cusimano, I couldn't hear you very well. Could you speak up a little bit? I understand you want to ask about the ability to negotiate, number one, and number two, something about arbitration.
The ability to negotiate in this particular instance and in future agreements. Have you ever heard or have any experience or knowledge of anyone and what occurs when a township or municipality declines to agree to an increase?
I will tell you this, the county generally will walk away from the project and say, well, we don't have to do it. That's my experience. So our leverage is not so great because at the end of the day, the county runs, they have the control over these contracts for the roads in the township. So it's very, very, I wouldn't say we have the best position necessarily. And, it's something that we could talk about and I prefer doing in closed session, but I'm not sure that we're in a position that's going to be very strong.
Thank you, Mr. Tomlinson. I'm going to call a brief recess. We have a technical problem on our side.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, my computer said my battery was running low on my laptop.
On the one that's in front of you?
Yes, so maybe it got unplugged.
I think it's plugged underneath Charlie.
Hold on a second.
Are you showing power now? Oh, mine just went off too. Oh, now went on.
Guess we gotta adjourn.
Maybe I'll just sign on with my.
Slide back a little bit, Frank. Stand by, we're getting it.
Did I bump something?
No, I think it was loose by Charlie's feet. But you're plugged in now.
Nothing, they've got it currently on
I think the socket was loose like the other one was.
I'll put my briefcase in. I don't think I take that in transit.
No, you don't. These sockets are loose. We'll have to tighten up all the things when we have a minute. Are you back on, Frank?
Yes, I can see my pretty face.
All right. Okay, I think we can resume.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Chairman, if I may, I just want to add on to kind of what Pete said with our hands being tied. One of the biggest complaints we get for board members is the infrastructure and the traffic in the township. And when we get the opportunity for these projects, we jump on them and try and do what we can to expedite it and get us prioritized in the county's list of projects. So it's unfortunate, and we are in a place where we can make the difference to make these projects happen. But I think our residents, in just my opinion, would be more disappointed at the lack of the progress in our infrastructure than they would at the, making the difference in this expenditure to make it happen. Just my opinion.
Chair, I'd just like to make a final comment, and that is this. Clearly, we're in a situation where we have no leverage, and we're not going to stop this project midstream. But I think we're going to have to, as we move into the budgeting cycle moving forward, we're going to have to try and do the best job we can to anticipate what kind of increased costs might be hitting us, so we can do the best job possible, budgeting for these. Not to say that the previous board didn't budget properly. They got the estimate. They, did the best they could. But, certainly if we're moving to an environment where these things are becoming more common, we're just gonna have to factor that into, maybe we can't do as many projects as we'd like.
Yeah.
Obviously, I don't think we can stop this project at this time.
I think Mr. Van Tiffen's comment is probably accurate, that the next estimate, the engineers will probably, instead of, maybe they added 10% to the last one, given that it was gonna happen in the future, maybe they're gonna add 20 or 25. And maybe that's a question we need to ask when we're looking at it, is what's your inflation factor? Give it a heartbeat to reset. And I think we're good. Go ahead. Mr.
I don't know
Kuzma.
where I got cut off, but I would appreciate if we look for our options, recourses available under the statutes, and perhaps solicit from the county a petition with our concerns, maybe with other municipalities, that we might find that they are more flexible than we anticipate. Many of the voters that elect them to offices in Macomb County reside in Macomb Township. And I think that we should pursue those avenues. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Kuzma. Anything else? Okay. So there's a motion on the floor from Clerk Posey, supported by Trustee Oliver, to revise the cost sharing agreement with the Macomb County Department of Roads, 3 Mile Road construction in the amount of $1,171,547. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries. Moving on to item 13, we have the authorization to extend an offer of employment to Kenneth Winky, a building inspector.
So moved, Mr. Chair.
Support.
Mr. Tabaka, could you please give us some background, please?
Yes, thank you, Chairman, board members. I'm here to request authorization to extend an offer of employment to Kenneth Winkle for the building inspector position. The Board of Trustees has authorized the HR department to recruit for the building inspector position. This position was posted in compliance with the MATE CBA agreement. This is a replacement for a retired employee. We received 19 applicants. 8 were invited to interview. Joe Maples, Mike Badamo, myself, and Sherilyn Arf were on the selection committee. We're recommending Kenneth Winkle for the position. Thank you for your consideration on this matter. If approved, it's contingent upon the successful completion of a post-offer, pre-hire physical exam, drug and alcohol screening, background check, and psychological exam. We are targeting an effective date of hire on or after April 26, 2021. And this is a budgeted position. Any questions?
Mr. Tabaka. Any discussion? Hearing none, there is a motion from Treasurer Gillette, supported by Trustee Nevers, to extend the offer of employment for the building inspector position to Kenneth Winky. All in favor? All opposed? Motion carries. Item 14 is an authorization to extend the COVID-19 expanded FMLA and emergency sick paid leave policy pursuant to the American Rescue Plan Act, which was effective on April 1st, 2021. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Support.
Mr.
So thank-
Tabaka?
Yes, thank you again, Mr. Chairman, board members. On March 11, 2021, the American Rescue Plan Act of 2021 was signed into law. One of the provisions under the act gives government employers the option to voluntarily provide emergency paid sick leave and expanded FMLA, effective again, April 1st, 2021 through September 30th, 2021. Guidance on ARPA is currently under development. Accordingly, the submitted version has been updated and is subject to further revision under the review and recommendation of Township Labor Council. If approved, the township will continue to offer and administer the extended leaves. Any questions?
Thank you, Mr. Tabaka. Are there any questions or discussion from the board? Okay, hearing none. We have a motion by Trustee Oliver, supported by Clerk Posey, to authorize to extend the COVID-19 expanded FMLA emergency and paid sick leave policy pursuant to the ARPA, which was effective April 1st. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion passes. Moving on to item 15, which is a rezoning request from agricultural to residential, one family urban, located on the south side of 24 Mile Road, west of Foss Road, permanent parcel ID 08-16-200-007. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Support.
Mr. Box, can you give us some background, please?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Supervisor and Board. The property, as you mentioned, is located south of 24 Mile west of Foss Road, and it is adjacent to the McBride Drain. They're seeking a rezoning from AG Agriculture to R1. The area is currently master planned for 3 units per acre, which matches the R1 zoning request that is being asked for. And the request was reviewed by all internal departments and all internal departments are recommending approval. This rezoning request was recommended for approval by unanimous vote of the Planning Commission at their April 6th meeting.
Thank you, Mr. Box. Any discussion or questions from the board?
I have several questions, Mr. Chairman. 3 units per acre, Mr. Bach, how many acres are involved?
I don't have that information right in front of me, but I believe it's around 46 or 48 acres.
All right, I had asked this question some time ago to the Planning Commission, whether there was a comprehensive plan on development. And I understand that the master plan anticipates growth, but is there any comprehensive plan as development which would take into account the burden on the infrastructure such as roads and also on the issue of water, the increased demand during peak hours that the township residents keep getting repeatedly hammered with increases from Great Lakes Water Authority. Is there, I think I asked a question in an earlier meeting whether or not any traffic studies were being performed, and I think the answer was no. Could you tell me, is there any comprehensive plan for development that would take into account these concerns that I have about the infrastructure being overwhelmed or overburdened?
Sure. So the current master plan, which I also remind everyone, we are in the process of updating the current master plan, but the current master plan does have an associated thoroughfare master plan, and that talks about how many roadway lanes should be on these roadways in the area. That is coordinated with the county and their overall plans as well. As far as traffic studies, they're the county roadways. They typically take care of traffic concerns and traffic issues. We do have opportunities where we meet with them and we can provide them areas of concern and request traffic studies. There's no guarantee that they'll actually conduct them, but we do have that opportunity to make some of those requests for traffic studies. We do have a development in currently that we're looking for a traffic study in coordination with the county. In terms of water, the water and sewer, I think maybe Mr. Van Tiffelen, if he's still available, could weigh in a little bit, but I know when the current master plan was put together in 2008, I believe there was some modeling done as far as water and sewer, and that helped determine how much density really could feasibly fit within the township in certain sections. And I think some of the upgrades over the years since 2008 have coordinated that infrastructure improvement with what was modeled with the densities that were planned for in the master plan of 2008.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Guzmano.
Mr. Van Tiffelen, one of the concerns I had when I first read the Great Lakes Water Authority contract and the amendments was that we were reducing our million-gallon daily flow from over 25 million gallons to just over 22.5 million gallons. And as we have continued to increase density of and develop these agricultural zoned areas into single residential, my concern is that we're setting ourselves up for failure and basically giving Great Lakes Water Authority an ability to not guarantee pressure and also raise our rates. I think it's incumbent on the township to take leadership in this part and develop
We do update the reliability study for the township and the water system every 5 years. The model is updated with the population gain in which areas of the township. The master plan for the water distribution system was set up for these areas to be developed. The model, proves that out. With regard to water rates, as I mentioned before, the major part of the issue that Macomb Township has is with peak water usage and not necessarily the average day usage. So we're using the water essentially at the wrong time if we want to keep rates low. If we could have everybody irrigate overnight, that would be ideal, and we'd be able to keep control of our rates. So we're continuing to try and get the word out there and do enforcement. Obviously, this is the time of year where sprinkler systems are turned on. I remind everybody to follow the ordinance. It's listed on the township's website in the Water and Sewer Department. We need to continue to those efforts. I think that's where our focus should be at this point.
Chairman, I'm not an engineer, but I suppose if we continue to add units and condominium units, they will be occupied by people with their families that take showers at the same time every morning, start their laundry at the same time every morning, flush their toilets at the same time every morning, and that would burden the system. If I may direct a question directly to Mr. Van Tifflin, has Great Lakes Water Authority engaged or begun to engage the township in any negotiations for rates?
No, every 4 years, the contract is open back up with all their customers. I think it's next year that our contract would open back up. That's when our numbers are looked at again, and the revised numbers would be put before the township board for approval.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. That concludes my questions.
Thank you, Mr. Kuzma.
Mr. Chairman, I just have an observation, I guess you could say, on the water rate issue. And that is if my understanding is that our rates were raised in the past because we weren't using enough water, in the sense that the Great Lakes Water Authority establishes what our share of the total regional water bill is going to be. And if we don't use enough water, they charge us more for the water we do use. So we pay for, quote unquote, our share. I think it's frustrating sometimes that we're encouraged to use less water. I know Mr. Van Tifflin's making the comment that is very understandable. We need to use it at night and keep peak rates down then. But using less water doesn't necessarily mean that we're going to get less of a bill. At least historically, it hasn't. Great Lakes Water Authority has established that, oh, you're using less, we should charge you more because you got to cover your cost of the.
We actually have to cover their overhead costs.
Right.
That's
So additional water users don't necessarily result in higher rates. It's when they use the water that seems to result in the higher rates, if I understand it correctly. That's it.
Okay, thank you. Okay. On my spot again. All right, so we have a motion from Treasurer Gillette, supported by Trustee Lucido, to approve the rezoning from agricultural to residential for parcel ID 0816-200-007. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries. Moving on to item 16, which is an extension of time for the preliminary plan for Rockwood site condominiums located on the north side of 21 Mile Road, 1/4 mile east of Romeo Plank Road, permanent parcel ID 08-28-376-002. Is there a motion?
So moved. Support.
Mr. Bach.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Supervisor and Board. So the preliminary plans, as they come through Planning Commission and through the board, they're typically approved for a 1-year time period. And in that 1 year, they go through the engineering phase. If they do not get through, their preliminary plan is expired. It's not necessarily that uncommon that some developments, especially if they're larger ones, can take longer than a year and they will need an extension. This one in particular is not necessarily a large development, but For a number of reasons, they did not get through their engineering phase, and it was actually previously extended for a year. And then when that was set to expire last year in April, they did not come in actually on time. They came in October. However, the board did approve that extension, but they approved it retroactively back to April when it was set to expire. So now it's April again, and they are set to expire and seeking yet another extension. However, in discussions with the engineering department, it does sound like they've made some substantial progress. They're very close to being complete with their engineering plans. So it's not likely that they would need an entire year at this point, but they are here seeking the 1-year extension of their preliminary plan.
Thank you, Mr. Box. Any questions or discussion? Hearing none, there is a motion by trustee Oliver, supported by trustee Lucido, to extend the time for the preliminary plan for Rockwood site condominiums on parcel ID 08-28-376-002. All in favor? Aye. All opposed? Motion carries. Moving on to item 17, which is a zoning request from agricultural to residential, one-family urban. Property is located on the east side of Romeo Plank Road, south of 25 Mile Road, permanent parcel ID numbers 08-08-328-001, 002, 003, and 004. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Mr. Box?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Supervisor and Board. So the 4 parcels in question, as you mentioned, are on Romeo Plank on the east side between 24 and 25 Mile. The properties are part of a development known as the Penzian Sub Number 1. There were actually 2 phases initially with this, Penzian Sub Number 1 and Penzian Sub Number 2. However, later on, Penzian Sub Number 2 was renamed to the Cracklewood Sub. It appears that somewhere along the line, a step was missed in rezoning these. We're here essentially cleaning up something that was missed in the early 1990s when this was approved. There's only 4 parcels. 2 of them have houses on them already. They were always intended to be residential. That was part of the Penzian sub plan that came in. Phase 2 was rezoned, and for whatever reason, phase 1 was never rezoned. This was actually only brought to our attention because somebody went to buy one of the vacant lots and started to realize the setback requirements on agricultural property would not make this property buildable whatsoever. And they started to ask how did these other houses get built? As we looked into it, the other houses' building permits listed the zoning as R1, when in fact it's actually AG. Again, this took place in the early 1990s, so this is really more of us cleaning up a situation that should have been many decades ago. If these are not rezoned, the 2 vacant parcels would not be allowed to be built on as is, or if they were built on, they would be very, very small structures with the setback requirements for agriculture. And as well, the 2 of the 4 parcels that currently have houses, those are actually currently illegal non-conforming structures at this time. We did take this to the Planning Commission, and it was recommended for approval by a vote of 6-1. 2 of the 4 property owners were in attendance that night, and after speaking with them, they were in support. They understood what we were doing, and they were in support of this rezoning. And there were some concerns that the other 2 people, because this is a township initiated rezoning, not a property owner requesting a rezoning, there were some concerns that those other 2 property owners might not be aware of what was happening. So we did send a certified letter to all 4 property owners and delivered. And we gave them instructions about what was happening, why we were doing this, and how they could contact us if they had any objections. None of those 4 properties contacted us with any objections.
Thank you, Mr. Box. Any questions or comments from the board?
I have a question. It might be for Leon. Does this affect their tax rate for the ones that are already there that are non-conforming, or is it the same rate for AG versus R1?
It should not affect their tax rate.
I'm just curious. Thank you.
Hearing no more discussion, there is a motion by Treasurer Gillette, supported by Clerk Posey, to Approve the rezoning request from agricultural to residential for parcel IDs 08-08-328-001, 002, 003, and 004. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries. Moving on to item 18 is a public hearing and an allocation of the CDBG 2022 service funding. Your motion.
So moved.
Support.
Second.
Mr. Box?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Supervisor and Board. As you mentioned, Community Development Block Grant funding, we're seeking to have a public hearing this evening. This item was actually already presented to the board in February and approved at the February 10th meeting. However, after that, it came to our attention that the public hearing required a notification in the newspaper at least 15 days prior, and there was only a 7-day notice given. We have since re-advertised, and it's been advertised for almost a month at this point, to have another public hearing. The county is allowing us to essentially redo this process as long as we finish before the end of April. That's why we're here this evening. And so we're here for another public hearing if anyone wanted to weigh in on some asks for the Community Development Block Grant funding.
Is there any discussion by the board before I open up the public hearing? Okay, hearing none. I'm opening up the public hearing. The time is 7:36. 26, I'm sorry, 7:26. Mr. Ivanowski, is there anyone virtually who would like to participate in the public hearing?
No, sir, I do not see anybody willing to speak at this time.
Great, thank you. There is no speakers. I'm closing the public hearing. The time is 7:27. There is a motion on the floor by Trustee Oliver, supported by Treasurer Gillette, to approve the allocation for the CDBG 2022 service funding. Clerk Posey, will you please call the roll?
Yes, Mr. Supervisor. Trustee Oliver,
Yes.
trustee Drollet,
What?
or treasurer Drollet.
Yes.
Trustee Kuzimano,
Yes.
trustee Lucido,
Yes.
trustee Nevers,
Yes.
clerk Posey, yes, and supervisor Viviano.
Yes, that motion carries. Item 19 is a code of ordinance revision to add chapter 9, article 5, outdoor business spaces. Mr. Box.
So moved, Mr. Chair.
I'm sorry, is there a motion?
Support.
Mr. Box, can you give us background, please?
Thank you, Mr. Supervisor. We did discuss this briefly at the last board meeting when we extended the temporary outdoor COVID business operations. This is essentially based and modeled off of that. It's been very successful. A number of businesses really like it. And so we are moving to create an ordinance that would allow it on a seasonal basis moving forward after the COVID pandemic is over. We have the language that should have been in your packet, and I think there was a revised version actually sent yesterday with some minor changes to that. We are seeking for an approval of this ordinance, code of ordinance revision, which will allow us to move forward with some seasonal outdoor businesses.
Thank you, Mr. Box. Any questions or discussion from the board? Hearing none, there is a motion by Treasurer Gillette, supported by Clerk Posey, to approve the code of ordinances to add chapter 9, article 5, seasonal outdoor business spaces. Clerk Posey, will you please call the roll?
Yes, Mr. Chairman. Treasurer Drollet, clerk Posey, yes. Trustee Kuzimano,
Yes.
trustee Lucido,
Yes.
trustee Oliver,
Yes.
trustee Nevers,
Yes.
supervisor Viviano.
Yes, motion carries. All right, moving on to item 20 is a request to adopt the ordinance amendment for chapter 6 fire code. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Phillips, are you available?
Hi, yes, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. Currently, the fire department is following and enforcing the International Fire Code 2009 edition. The building department has adopted the 2015 International Building Code, which by reference does include the 2015 International Fire Code. I'm requesting this evening that the board formally adopt the 2015 edition of the International Fire Code for us to adopt and enforce with the amendments that are spelled out in your packet. And this is necessary in order to move ahead with the next couple items dealing with the medical marijuana. And with that, I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Chief. Any comments or questions from the board? Hearing none, there is a motion by Clerk Posey, supported by Trustee Kuzmano, to adopt the ordinance amendment, Chapter 6 to the Fire Code. Clerk Posey, will you please call the roll?
Yes, Chairman. Clerk Posey, yes. Trustee Kuzmano?
Yes.
Trustee Lucido?
Yes.
Trustee Oliver?
Yes.
Trustee Nevers?
Yes.
Treasurer Drollet?
Yes.
Supervisor Viviano?
Yes, that motion carries. Moving on to item 21 is a request to adopt a zoning ordinance, Article 27-10.2607, the MMMA. Is there a motion?
So moved. Support.
So this item is, I'm going to address this one. This is a project that I've been working on since I was elected. This ordinance will zone out the ability of caregivers under the MMMA, which is the Medical Marijuana Act that was passed by ballot initiative, to grow in a residential neighborhood. We do this tonight to protect the integrity of our neighborhoods so that those of us who live here, who live in what we assume would be a residentially zoned, it is a residentially zoned, and would maintain the characteristics of a residentially zoned neighborhood, would be able to enjoy our properties without the interference of what is in effect a commercial operation when somebody is growing 72 plants in their home. I've worked with legal counsel and with my colleagues to develop a plan that will move these operations into areas where they would be more appropriate. We have no desire to eliminate people's ability to enjoy the rights that were given to them by the people of Michigan in their through these ballot initiatives that have passed. A patient can still grow 12 plants in his home if he is licensed to do so by the state. However, someone using the additional caregiver license would have to find a more suitable location, a commercial or industrial space. This is not an indictment or and anyone who chooses to partake. That's certainly up to them and it is their right. But we also have a responsibility to our homeowners and our residents that their rights are also protected. So given that, is there any questions or discussion from the board? Okay. Hearing none, there is a motion by Trustee Oliver, supported by Trustee Nevers, to adopt the zoning ordinance, Article 27-10.2607 MMMA. Clerk Posey, will you call the roll?
Yes, Mr. Chairman. Trustee Oliver?
Yes.
Trustee Nevers?
Yes.
Trustee Kuzmano?
Yes.
Trustee Lucido?
Yes.
Treasurer Drollet?
Yes.
Clerk Posey, yes. And Supervisor Viviano?
Yes, motion carries. Item 22 is a request to adopt a pension plan stipulation ordinance.
So move, Mr. Chair.
Support. Treasurer Gillette, would you like to address this one, please?
I would. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. What this ordinance would do would be to require the township to temporarily put a freeze on the pension assets contributed by the township of an elected official or a township official or employee if they are charged with committing a felony crime related to their duties as an officer of the township, an employee of the township. This was sort of brought to my attention by Trustee Cusmano before he was elected to the board, when one of the previous members of this board was charged with a crime, a felony crime related to his duties as an official, and then immediately went and withdrew as many of the contributions that had been contributed by the township to his pension fund as possible before he was convicted, thereby making it impossible to utilize a state law that's in place that would have allowed us to not pay out those publicly contributed pension funds. So what this will do is essentially allow the township, if an elected official or an employee is being charged with a felony related to their duties here, their pension account would be administratively held, so they would not be able to withdraw any of the public funds until after the matter was settled by court. So if indeed they're found not guilty, they would have that funds restored, access to those funds restored. Or if they're found guilty, then those funds could be denied them under state law and under the ordinance of this township. I'm happy to entertain any questions anyone might have.
Thank you, Treasurer Gillette. Any questions?
I do have a question, actually. When I first read this, a few questions came to mind. And maybe Mr. Tomlinson can help out with this too. If somebody is charged and they plead, can they make it part of their plea to say, I want to make sure that I get my pension or anything like that? Would that revert to the state law, or can we shut that down on the township level?
Yeah, I would have to defer to Mr. Tomlinson on that question.
Mr. Chairman, so at the end of the day, the plea negotiations so here's how I see this would happen. So we have a person who ends up getting charged with a felony arising out of their employment. We could go before a judge, get a freeze order on that. And any type of freeze order, I would think, or I would say, would be subject to a discussion with the township as to how we want to treat that particular matter. So once that freeze order is in place, until it's dissolved in some fashion, we would have input onto that, because the township would be a quote victim unquote, and under the ordinance we would be making sure that that couldn't happen. So would it be subject to negotiations and pleas? I'm sure it is. It would be. I'm not going to say it wouldn't be, but we'd have significant input on that. That's a very good question, Mr. Lucido.
Another follow-up to that, and just to clarify, it's only on the money that the township contributed to their pension, not what they contributed.
That would be correct.
And there's no way to shut that down, correct? Because that's obviously their retirement that they contributed, it was their money.
Yes, and we derive our authority from state law, and the state law is limited to that which we would contribute.
That's it for me. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Trustee Lucido. Any other questions?
Chairman, I have a couple of questions and I also have a comment. I'll start with the comments first. In the case of the former trustee of this township, recently the assistant attorney general who was in charge of the office at the time expressed amazement and surprise that the statute even existed. So that'll give you some idea of how well protected the citizenry is on these pension issues with corrupt officials. My question for Mr. Tomlinson is this been done anywhere else in any other municipalities?
I'm going to be honest with you, Mr. Cusumano. I'm not sure. I don't know. But we as Macomb Township having to deal with it firsthand, I think it's obviously very well taken that we're going to be at the forefront of it no matter what. I mean, at the end of the day, we want to make sure that those that earned the pension and did right by the township, and those that didn't don't deserve it, plain and simple. And I think that's what Treasurer Drollet is getting to. And it's a shame, quite frankly, that neither a prosecutor nor the AG's office took action more quickly on this issue.
Well, I believe at the time Eric Smith was still the prosecuting attorney. He's got his own kettle of fish.
You are correct, sir. You are correct, sir.
Treasurer Drollet indicated that there'd be an administrative freezing of the pension, and during your presentation or speaking on the subject, you indicated that you'd seek an order. Could you explain for me how you go about going to court and whether or not the township would be exposed to any type of claims or litigation without a court order?
Well, I don't think we can do it on our own. I think under the state statute, it grants us the authority to, or it grants the authority for a freezing order to be issued by the judge. And we'd have to go before a judge to do so. I provided for that in section 2-155 of our ordinance. We'd have to follow that process. It's a due process requirement. So once we follow due process, and as long as we do so, our exposure for any liability was significantly limited.
Mr. Chairman, I just want to make a final comment. I'm very concerned about holding people accountable for their misdeeds, and in fact, filed some litigation in order to try to recoup those funds. However, I could not pursue that litigation as a citizen because it's very onerous, and I'm in support of this measure. And I urge my colleagues to vote yes on this item. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Kuzmano. Any further discussion, comments from the board? Okay, hearing none. There is a motion by Treasurer Gillette, supported by Trustee Lucido, to adopt the pension plan stipulation ordinance. Clerk Posey, will you please call the roll?
Yes, Mr. Chairman. Treasurer Drollet.
Yes.
Trustee Lucido.
Yes.
Trustee Kuzma.
Yes.
Trustee Oliver.
Yes.
Trustee Nevers.
yes,
Clerk Posey, yes. Supervisor Viviano.
Yes, the motion carries. Moving on to item 23 is a request to authorize the supervisor to execute the real property donation agreement. Is there a motion?
So moved.
support,
Go with Trustee Oliver and Trustee Nevers. So some time ago, shortly after I took office, I believe, we were contacted by a very generous person who have owned property in our we're back. So I don't know exactly where we cut out. Mr. Tomlinson, do you know where I got cut off there?
You had 2 words in, and the next agenda item about generous something.
Okay, so I'll start over. So item 23 is a authorization for the supervisor to execute the real property donation agreement. We had a motion by Trustee Oliver and supported by Trustee Nevers. And I was just making the brief comment that we're very grateful for this donation. It is being donated from Joyce Pitchford and Bill Kay. And we are looking forward to the opportunity to announce plans for a park as soon as we develop them fully. So with that, I will entertain any questions or comments from the board.
Make a comment expressing the appreciation of myself, and I'm sure the rest of the board, for the generosity of the donors and how they are going to facilitate a park and an asset for this community for many decades to come as a result of their very generous gift to this township. So I just want to express my appreciation to the two donors and for their generosity.
Mr. Chairman, I would like to mirror what Treasurer Jolette indicated. We're excited for this generous donation and the opportunities that it might provide to our residents going forward. So we're looking forward to making good use of it.
Any other comments?
Mr. Supervisor, I would agree with both Mr. Jolette's and Ms. Posey's comments. Thank you.
Okay, hearing no more discussion?
One quick question. When we finally get our park, it appears that we're gonna put it there, and that's great, and I do appreciate these two residents that donated, and that's quite a gift when you really think about it, the price of land, and just gave it to us. But are we gonna commemorate with their, we're gonna have them here?
So one of the stipulations, it's in the agreement that's in the board packet. They have requested for the park to be named after Pamela Pitchford's parents, who are Joyce and Bill. I think I accidentally said that her name was, the donor was Joyce, but the joint donor is Pamela Pickford. Her mother and father were Joyce and Bill Pickford. So yes, the park that will be developed in the future will be named for them. There will be a plaque. We will invite them to both the groundbreaking and a grand opening ceremony of some kind.
Good.
They are very humble and a little bit, reserved and shy. They didn't want to come here tonight for a public acknowledgement, which I appreciate, but we're going to do as much as we can, as much as they allow us to do for them. And in fact, later, during my comments, I have a letter from Mrs. Pickford that I'm going to read.
Good. Thank you.
So hearing no more discussion, we have a motion by Trustee Oliver, supported by Trustee Nevers, to authorize the supervisor to execute the real property donation agreement. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? That motion carries. Item 24 is a request to approve the vehicle fleet management service. Is there a motion?
So move.
Support. This item is to engage with Enterprise Rent-A-Car, who would take over or partially take over helping us manage our fleet. Under our direction, they would begin replacing vehicles in our fleet that need to be replaced. We have complete control over this process. They are simply our vendor for how we will be acquiring vehicles. The advantage is that there's many advantages. One of the big ones is that we're going to be able to control our cash flow on a little bit more consistent basis by not having single expenditures for purchase. The other big advantage is that they, given the size of Enterprise, they have an entire system developed to monitor the used car market. And even though we will sign 3-year leases, we are free to return them and swap them out at any time. And if they identify a time when the used car that we have has more value than we actually have paid into it, they will let us know. They will swap it out, and the township will receive equity back in the form of a cash credit on our bills. They did some proposals, included them in the packet. They're estimating an approximate $1 million savings, just under $1 million over a period of 10 years. Internally, we did our own estimates using their model. We used much, much more conservative numbers just to be on the safe side. Those savings proved out to be what we estimate at the very low end, $20,000 a year in savings. This also frees up some of our staff from going through this process. They are a pre-approved vendor with the state of Michigan. And we will not have to come to the board for purchases and sales of vehicles under this agreement. They will be able to handle it administratively. So that being said, is there any comments or questions?
I got a question.
Sure.
How many vehicles do we have in our fleet roughly right now?
I think the number we're working with is 50. Is that right, Jason, roughly? Again, we're not obligated to, there are certain vehicles we would rather maintain control of. We don't have to give them any of them.
Okay.
So things like our tool
That's right.
trucks, some of our more complicated vehicles, certainly our fire equipment, we're not gonna.
Water and sewer, their dump trucks and stuff.
Dump trucks, things like that, no, but they're pickup trucks. We can do tool trucks if we choose to, and Enterprise does the entire thing from order the truck, install the boxes, put the stickers on, put the light bars on. All we do is tell them the specs we want, they match it, and they bring it right to us.
Wow.
And then
It is convenient.
It is convenient. It should save us quite a bit, not only money, but some time and energy internally too.
So when you say swapping out, do we have a pick number on the odometer and we say each vehicle, when it reaches this number, it's gotta go? Or does Enterprise manage that for us?
Well, Mr. Gelly has been trying to institute a similar program himself, trying to basically turn our vehicles over at such a time after a few years before maintenance becomes an issue. And because we get special pricing on vehicles, they have a very high return if we get rid of them before the mileage gets to a certain point, or become a certain age. Enterprise does effectively the same thing. They have some advantages in their size and in their ability to monitor the market as a whole, much like a stockbroker would monitor the stock market. So they're going to take that over and to manage that for us.
Good.
And we should see a net savings.
Mr. Chairman, it's my understanding that one of the challenges that we have with the way we currently administer the fleet is when we go to sell the vehicles at auction, we pay 8 to 12% fee to the auction house for them to dispose of the vehicle through their auction house. And we'll be saving substantially from that by leasing the vehicles and having Enterprise swap them out rather than us costing 12% or 8% to get rid of it.
Yeah, and in addition to that, there is some time and energy involved in having our people perform the sale, go through the public sale process because we are obligated to do so. If it's leased, Enterprise still owns it. We build up equity in it throughout the lease, and when the equity is at a pretty high level, when we go to return it, we actually get that back. So,
thank you.
Good. Any more questions? Okay, hearing none, there is a motion by Treasurer Dillette, supported by Trustee Lucido, to approve the vehicle fleet management services from Enterprise Rent-A-Car. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries. The last item tonight is a request to approve a 2-year contract with Comerica Bank for Lockbox services. Is there a motion?
Motion to approve 2-year contract with Comerica Bank for Lockbox services, but I'd like to add subject to review and recommendation from Township Labor Council.
Support.
Treasurer Gillette?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. By using a lockbox service, what we're doing is speeding up the process for the collection of tax bills and water bills. The bills would be sent to residents, and then when the residents return the bill in the form of a check, it would go to what they call a lockbox, which is essentially operated by the bank, which will process them automatically by opening and scanning the codes and post to the citizen's account much more quickly, and then deposit to our account much more quickly. Currently, especially when it's particularly busy during what we call tax time, there can be many weeks lag between when somebody mails a check into us and when post office is a bit of a lag, but then there's a lag here too, oftentimes in getting to the bills to open them, to process them, to update them. So several weeks might go by and residents oftentimes wonder, did you get my check? And they'll be calling us, how come it hasn't been deducted? In addition, by the use of a lockbox, we'll get the payments attributed to our account immediately or much more quickly, which will help us with interest as well. So they won't be sitting out there for several weeks in many cases. This as a lockbox system is used by, I think, pretty much every major municipality in Macomb County of our size, City of Warren, Sterling Heights, Clinton Township, Shelby Township, Harrison Township, all use lockbox services. We have negotiated I think a very, very competitive credits with Comerica Bank. We get credits for the amount of money that we have, I guess, in a particular financial institution, and we can use those credits to reduce the cost of lockbox. We went out to the banks that we do business with that offer credits, which included First State Bank, Comerica, and that we happen to have a lockbox in Michigan, and a reasonable distance from Macomb Township. And the best offer we got, the request for pricing, was from Comerica Bank. In addition, by locking in the credits to a 2-year agreement, we lock those credits in that may diminish within those 2 years if we didn't have a lockbox. So for example, right now, Comerica Bank is reducing the credits from 0.4 to 0.128, which would reduce everybody's credits, but we would be locked in to the higher rating. The ultimate result of this, when we apply what would have happened in 2020 had we used lockbox in that year based on the number of payments that would go through it and the fees associated with that, is that when we apply the credits, the cost becomes quite low. As a matter of fact, it would be low. We'd save money based on we no longer would have to hire part-time help during the busy tax season, have some part-time folks come in, because we'd be able to focus on handling other administrative tasks in the office instead of opening and inputting and things like that. So this is going to save the residents money. It's going to make the process move more quickly, and I think it's something that we need to do in order to keep up with the size of our growing community and frankly stay up with technology. Happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Treasurer Gillette. Any questions?
I just have one question. Obviously, it's a 2-year agreement. How hard is it, in your experience, or if you know, to change?
So they would get the, if we change to another service, we would change the return address on their return
So
envelope.
it's just as simple as changing.
They would just stick the check in the envelope they normally do and stick it in the mail.
Thank you.
Any other comments, questions?
Mr. Chairman, I got a question. There was an addition to the motion, an amendment rather, subject to approval by Labor Council. Can someone explain what the issue is with Labor Council on this decision?
Yes, we got a request from a labor representative asking to discuss the issue prior to moving forward. And so we're just committing that we will not, that we'll make sure that there's no challenge to the contract with regard to our labor union negotiated agreements through our Labor Council.
Okay, so if there's any significant deviation from what's being presented today, I suppose it'd be a follow-up motion to ratify whatever.
Correct.
It would have to be, yes.
We're going to just have just a discussion with our labor council, given the contact that was made today. Our labor council follow his advice. As long as he approves of this measure and doesn't see a problem with it, we're going to proceed. Allow Mr. Gillette to execute that contract. If our labor council poses some issue that we should pause, we will pause and not execute the agreement.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. That's all I have.
If there's no more discussion, we have a motion by Clerk Posey, supported by Treasurer Gillette, to approve the 2-year contract with Comerica for Lockbox services, subject to approval.
Review and recommendation.
Review and recommendation by Labor Council. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion passes.
Motion to adjourn.
Moving on to board comments. Trustee Kuzmano.
Mr. Chairman, if I might respond to a public comment earlier by one of the residents. That pay rate took place before I took my position on the board. There's no raise for trustees. I was not involved in any conversations and negotiations regarding that matter whatsoever. I was not able to vote on the pay raise that the citizen had concerns about. I wouldn't say, and I've stated publicly, that the clerk has obtained certifications. I think I made public comment that it should be linked to some certifications. But it was all done before I took office. The statute reads that the Board of Trustees shall set the compensation of the officers. I think it's really pushing the envelope to with a new incoming board to project pay increases where that incoming board is sitting. The statute doesn't say specifically what the board is. I assume that if court ever looked at it, it would be a sitting board in office at the time. On a completely different subject matter, I'm asking that the board consider putting together a subcommittee on water and sewage issues so that the negotiations with Great Lakes Water Authority are not, as has been tradition under the minutes that I've reviewed, where Mr. Wangland and Mr. Van Tifflin go into negotiations whereby the Great Lakes Water Authority basically just hands a take it or leave it proposal, where Great Lakes Water Authority has at that meeting legal counsel, someone to take the minutes. I think there should be board representation in that meeting. And I'd ask that the board at some future date consider authorizing a subcommittee for that purpose. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Trustee Kuzmano. Trustee Oliver.
Yes, I want to thank everybody that worked hard on the new ordinance, the marijuana ordinance. Appreciate that, Mr. Tomlinson, all parties. Also, again, thank the residents for that generous donation on that property. And that's it.
Trustee Lucido.
Just a couple of things. First thing on the marijuana ordinance, there's going to be residents that are upset about that. Obviously, there are people that are growing inside the house. And the only comment I'd like to make on that is that's not where it belongs. It's as simple as that. You may be upset with it. Go get a commercial building. We got plenty of commercial buildings, plenty of industrial buildings you can do that at. Let's keep it out of the neighborhoods. If you're welcome to do it, just do it the proper way. For the new park area, I'm really excited about that. I like that it's in the southern end of the township now. I know that a lot of the nicer parks are in the north end, and I think that that helps out some of the residents in the south end. That'll be good. Obviously, we don't have a full plan for it yet, but I think that'd be great for the residents on the more south side. And really, that's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Trustee Lucido. Trustee Nevers.
Yes, I would just like to say I am encouraged and impressed with the amount of money that this new board has been able to ferret out and to get passed. And it's just at its infancy. So I'm very appreciative of that. And I'm sure our residents are. Again, to the people that donated the property for the park, wonderful gesture. And the marijuana law or ordinance passed to keep it out of residential areas is the right move. So thank everybody that had anything to do with those projects.
Thank you, trustee Nevers. Treasurer.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. When it was first discussed in dealing with the marijuana ordinance, I had some initial concerns because, I've always believed that people have the right to do anything they want as long as they don't violate the rights of others. But in seeing the impact that these commercial operations essentially have in residential neighborhoods on their neighbors, they're essentially, denying their neighbors the peaceful enjoyment of their own property. So I believe that there is a place for it. It's just not when you're disrupting your neighborhood and disrupting your neighbors. So I want to extend my appreciation to the supervisor and to those that were very careful in navigating to take into account what the citizens have passed, what the rights of individuals are, while also protecting the neighboring properties and communities. So I want to express my appreciation for that.
Thank you, Treasurer. Clerk Posey.
I would just like to thank the Parks and Recreation Department along with our Grounds and Facilities Department. They pulled off the Easter extravaganza a few weekends ago, and we were one of very few communities that were able to pull off an Easter event while still practicing the social distancing guidelines, and still offering this event to all the children in the township. It was very enjoyable. It was well done, and they again had to work under a time restraint, trying to figure out if they were going to be able to go indoors or outdoors, and they pulled it off outdoors. So hats off to them. They did a fantastic job once again. Also, hear again what Mr. Drollet said about our marijuana to accommodate that. And once again, we get several phone calls asking about notary service. The clerk's office offers notary service at no charge. There's 5 of us in the office that are certified notaries, and we are available. You don't need an appointment with so many of us certified, so you can come to town hall between the hours of 9 to 4, and we're happy to notarize any of your documents at no charge to you as a resident. That's all I have.
Thank you, Clerk Posey. I'd like to echo Clerk Posey's congratulations to Parks and Rec and to Facilities and Grounds. The Easter event was great. We had a great turnout. The residents that were able to attend seemed to have a great time. Many of them expressed their gratitude that we actually had an event. It was a great turnout by the board. 6 of us were there. It was a beautiful day, and I couldn't be any more pleased that we actually were able to have an event that looks something like non-COVID times. So I think all of that is fantastic. On the marijuana ordinance, I want to go on record as saying that the people of the state of Michigan have legalized marijuana, and nobody in my position is able to challenge that. I have no desire to challenge that. That is law in the state of Michigan. What we did tonight was very simple, and it was very narrow. We simply said, if you're going to partake in marijuana, that's fine. If you're going to grow marijuana as a caregiver, and you're going to grow so many plants that you are going to create smells that violate your neighbor's space, burnout meters potentially, which has happened many times in our community, blow the transformers, which has happened in our community. It just simply doesn't belong in a residence. Houses weren't built for that. They mold and they cause all kinds of problems, all of which we've already seen. There are other places for that activity. That's all we're saying. So for those of you who choose to continue to grow under the Caregiver Act, you're going to have to seek out a commercial or industrial facility. If you are currently growing, I suggest you seek out a commercial or industrial facility or relocate your operation to a community that allows it, because we no longer do. So that being said, Pamela Pitchford, one of our generous donors, asked me to read a letter tonight, and I'm going to do that now. I just want to clarify, I think I misspoke earlier. Her husband's name is Joe Kay. I think I said Bill by mistake because the father's name is Bill. So the proposed allocation for a generous property donation from Pamela Pitchford and Joe Kay in the honor of Joyce, Bill, and Todd Pitchford. The Pitchford story, doing more. Joyce and Bill Pitchford originally settled in Macomb County near 22.5 Mile and Van Dyke almost 6 decades ago, where they raised their beloved children, Pamela and Todd. Following retirement, Washington Township became their home for 22 years. They loved living in the Maple Villas, no, I think they meant Washington, Macomb Township. I'm going to correct that for them. Macomb Township became their home for 22 years. They loved living in the Maple Villas community where they cherished the time spent with their neighbors and friends there before moving to a retirement facility on Cass Lake a few years ago. Joyce and Bill were born during the Great Depression, and they both valued and pursued lifelong learning and were dedicated to hard work and public service. During World War II, Bill was proud to serve in the Army Air Corps. Throughout their lives together, Joyce and Bill were active members of the Presbyterian Church of Utica, where they made many close friends and dedicated countless hours to the church and community. They were also wonderful, supportive friends to their extended family, who always knew that they could count on Joyce and Bill for a helping hand whenever it was needed. The pair met while attending Michigan State Normal School, which later became Eastern Michigan University in Ypsilanti. While raising her family, Joyce completed her bachelor's degree in education and lovingly devoted herself to her life's passion of teaching elementary school in the Utica Community School District. While teaching, she returned to school and earned a master's degree. Many of Joyce's students still live in the area, and it will bring her joy that they may reflect on fond memories of their time together when visiting the park that is named for her and her family. Joyce and Bill were avid readers, excellent bridge players, entertaining storytellers, and beautiful singers. Their home is meticulously cared for and welcoming to all. Joyce and Bill excelled at everything they put their minds to, especially finding the pleasure in her every day. They were passionate dog lovers who raised their 2 dogs, Heidi and Buster, with joy. Later, they were kind enough to open their home when dog sitting was needed for fortunate friends and family. Joyce and Bill's son, Todd, was an extraordinary and renowned artist, specializing in original stained glass designs and restorations, which are featured prominently in restaurants, churches, businesses, and private residences throughout Michigan. The Pitchfords lost Todd almost 2 decades ago to mental illness, and he is missed dearly. He was a beautiful and loving soul, with exceptional gifts and an endearing spirit and a gentle and generous heart. Joyce, Bill, and Todd have played significant and meaningful roles in the lives of their friends, family, and communities. For this reason, Pamela and her husband, Joe Kay, are dedicating this donation to each of them. They propose the ground to be served as a park for the community to enjoy, honoring the way Joyce, Bill, and Todd were devoted to enhancing and giving back to their communities. Unfortunately, Bill passed away last September. Joyce, however, will turn 91 this year and still resides at her retirement home in Keego Harbor. She would feel privileged to join Pamela and Joe at a groundbreaking ceremony to celebrate the contribution they are making in honor of her, Bill, and Todd. And once again, on behalf of Macomb Township, we thank Pamela and Joe for their generous donation, and we are looking forward to that groundbreaking. So with all that, motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn at 8:15 PM, Mr. Chair.
Any discussion on the motion? We have a motion by Treasurer Gillette, supported by Trustee Kuzmano to adjourn. All in favor? My apologies. Hold on. Clerk Posey, will you please call the roll?
Yeah, Treasurer Drollet,
Yes.
Trustee Kuzmano,
Yes.
Trustee Lucido,
Yes.
Trustee Oliver,
Yes.
Trustee Nevers,
Yes.
Clerk Posey, yes. Supervisor Viviano.
Off for 2 minutes if I tried. Yes, the motion carries. This meeting is adjourned.